Hi there, hello. My name's Lines, it's great to see you. Now today we're going to be continuing with how to draw furries, or monsters, it's good for both. Now this was going to be a combined video about how to draw hands, or claws, and feet and paws. However, it turns out there's probably a lot more to that than I was expecting. I've been studying pretty hard for the last couple of weeks, hence this meme, and one of the things I discovered is that the feet are going to need their own video, along with the legs. So this one's just going to be the hands. Now we're also going to talk a little bit in this video, and the next one, just like the last one, about organic rhythm. This one's going to be really essential for how to do things like where to put the tufts of fur, and how to make them look like fur instead of just a sort of sawtooth pattern. Now once we've done that, we can move on to drawing the hands themselves. We're going to go through a quick primer in how to draw a hand. Now, I do have a separate video on how to draw hands. I am going to cover off the basics here, but if you really want to draw good hands on furries, monsters, people, you're really going to want to have your basics down. I've got a whole separate video for that one. I do recommend you flick through it. This one will work independently, but it'll also work better if you have a better grounding in how to construct the hand and different poses. So have a look at that one. I'll link that now. Now, building on that then, what we're going to do is we're going to show the hand at different levels of animalistic traits and what things to change to make them go from just a normal hand to a straight up animal paw. And we'll list out those things individually so you can pick and mix which ones you want to do. We're also going to go through and show you how to do different kind of species of hands and how they're essentially the same construction blocks, just different detailing at the end, with some changes like numbers of fingers. And once we've done that, I'll go through and we'll do some practice step by step, and I'll show you the process of putting them together from the simple shapes in the sketch to approximating the line art. And then, once that's done, we'll put it all together, and I'll quickly go over an overview of a speed paint, going all the way from sketch to ink, colors, shading, etc. Now, once we've gone over that, the next thing you can do is if you want to have a go yourself, there will be, like always, some homework. So I'll link that in the description, and you can have a go of that. Post it on the Discord. I'm I'm a little behind in catching up with everyone's homework and doing marking. There's quite a lot of you now. I may be at the tipping point where I can't give everyone individual feedback, or maybe I can, but it's just going to take me a minute. Let's see how I do. Maybe realism is hitting me. We'll see. Now, if you like the video and want to support the channel, then consider becoming a member on our Patreon, or just hitting like and subscribe and feeding the algorithm. Tell me what you'd like to see in a new video, or what you had for lunch. Anything will do. I'd really like to hear from you, any questions you have. I'm in the comments fairly regularly. Thus far I'm keeping up, but again, we may be hitting a tipping point, which is a wonderful problem to have, so I'm very grateful for that. Now, you'll also have noticed that down along the bottom of the screen there's been a few excellent pieces of artwork. These are from the current server event, which is to draw a character which is your first fictional crush. Well, all of them have been amazing. And one in particular stood out, and that one has won the server event, and that's this one here. So the event was to show your first crush, and also tell us why they are. And since the concept is what it's marked on, this one communicates the character really well, and the art's fantastic also. So great job on that for Wibbon. They get to choose what the speed paint's going to be. Now the current server activity is to do an image of whatever it is that heals you. Things can be pretty rough at the moment. Things are a bit stressful for everyone around the globe. So whatever it is that sort of gives you peace, that gives you sort of solace, I would love to see a picture of that. Enter that one in the Discord there. And if it's picked as the winner, then you get to pick whatever I do for the speed paint, within reason. So let's then get stuck into the instruction section. So to begin then, let's go over and talk a little bit about rhythm. Now, if we draw some really mechanical repeating patterns here, like some little tufts, maybe some little points, and then even if we do decide to mix it up a bit and go big, little, medium, big, little, medium, big, little, medium, this breaks it up a little bit, but watch when we zoom out, you'll see that they all look really mechanical, and the bottom one, the repetition becomes really apparent, like zooming out in an old video game. That tiling there will make it look unnatural. Now it's really important to get a touch on this and try not to repeat any shapes or sizes. So here, we'll do the tufts, but we'll avoid repeating anything. We'll make sure that every shape is unique, and it looks like fur. and a line below, we can do mountains. So long as we have some overlap and difference in size, it'll look like mountains. And on the bottom one, we can do like the fringe or a hairline. And that irregularity and organic shape is going to really help us communicate that organic nature. Now, the other thing we want to do is if you want to have a practice of this, just grab your canvas and see if you can make it from one side of it to the other. And I'll draw little dots on here to demonstrate where you'd be starting and finishing. Now, the next thing I want to talk about is how we're going to do the tufts. The best way to think of this can be imagine you have the corner on a racetrack. Most of the cars are going to make the corner just fine, but some of them don't make it, and they leave skid marks as they leave the road based on the direction they were traveling. This is a great way of figuring out where you would put those skid marks. Or you can think of them as essentially a fence. And if you curve the fence, the panels of the fence will fan outwards. And the hair is the same thing. As you bend the skin, the hairs will radiate outwards. So here's a demonstration of a shoulder on a character. As we'll draw the line, but as we go over the shoulder, didn't make the corner, so it flared out. And again, on the elbow, it flared out. This is a way of telling where's a good spot to do those spills, those flares and tufts of fur. So, as a demonstration, let's draw a figure here, fairly low angle, and we'll just do a fairly basic figure, so a female figure, shaping out the limbs. If you're interested in how to draw the female figure, I've got a video for that one that you can grab in the channel there, I'll link it. Now, once we've got the basic forms in, what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a sort of refined sketch over the top, but on the body, I'm not going to have any tufts of fur. And we'll use this as our baseline, and as we go around the body, we'll think of where we can see those corners and where we think they wouldn't be able to make the corner, where the tufts would sort of come out the side there. Now, things like the hair and tail, I'll make them fluffy, and that's that application of rhythm we talked about. And so now, we've got the figures here. So where are we going to put those flares and tufts? Well, an easy one here is that jawline. So since the jawline has a sharp corner to it, we're going to have a tuft there. And at the base of the ears, where it goes from the hair to the ear, there's going to be that transition space where it'll tuft out. The shoulder, that's an easy one, a big hard corner. And where the top of the upper arm flares out, that's one. The top of the wrist when it bends, and even the inside of the wrist where it's compressed, that can disturb the fur and make it tuft up a bit as well. And then of course knuckles as well, they're a great spot. Where it goes from the back to the start of the tail, that's a great spot. And again, that bit of the upper arm there. Now, on the tops of the thighs, depending how round you've got them, you can have a bit of a corner there, and then you can have things like the backs of the calves. They're another great spot that has a fairly sharp turn. Anywhere where you have a sharp turn that your imaginary little race car can't make a corner, like the heel, is a great spot to add it. And again, anywhere where it compresses, you can have a few little tufts in there as well. Sort of like skin folds, but fluffier. And now, when we compare them apples to apples without the colour, you can see the difference it makes. We haven't added very much fluffiness, but what we have added really communicates that fur texture, even with just simple line art, and no actual shading or texturing of the figure. It's just line art. Alright, so the next thing we want to move on with is the basics of hand construction. Start with the palm, slightly wider at the top. We'll draw a cross through it. And now, we're going to add the most important bit, that point at the base of the wrist. That's the point that the entire hand rotates around. So, everything's radial from that point. So there'll be a curve to the top of the palm. And now when we add the fingers, they radiate from the base of the wrist. The reason is that's where the bones come from. So we'll start with the middle finger. Since the middle finger is the same length as the palm, we'll map out where the four fingers are going to go and leave little spaces there between them so they don't just sort of form a V. And now we can get the height by drawing a radial line around the base of the wrist, and the pointer and ring fingers are the same height as halfway down the top section of the middle finger. Because remember, each of the fingers have 3 sections. And then the pinky is 2/3 the length of the middle finger. So you can just get that radial line and match it to the second knuckle. Now we're going to add the pad for the thumb. Now you can see we're going to do a left hand here, because left hands are easy to reference. And you'll notice that the thumb is roughly as long as the first knuckle of either the middle or ring fingers. It can be a little longer, there's some variance there. Now, once we've got those base shapes in, we'll do a sort of simulated line art or a sort of refined sketch, and we'll add just a little bit of webbing between the pointer and thumb. There's not much there, it's much more apparent when you splay the hand out, but it's worth having there and keeping in mind. And also remember that the fingers will taper slightly narrower over their length. That one's important, especially when we move on to the sort of furry and monster hands, since they'll do the reverse, or sometimes they'll do it even more. Now, let's map out the pads on the palm. Now, this isn't a furry thing, this is just your hand. You have pads there as well. There's thicker bits of flesh on the palm that help you grip things. They're essentially, if you imagine a robot hand, it'll have little rubber bits to help it grab things. You kind of already have them, and they're set up in these pattern here. They're thicker bits of the palm. They're not muscle, or except for the one at the base of the thumb. They're just there to help you grip things. And it's from these we're going to build the furry ones. So let's color them in. We've got the big one, the big mass for the thumb, the one on the outside edge of the palm, the one just below the fingers, and then we'll have the pads on the fingers themselves. These are the things that prevent your hand from being flat. So when viewed from the side, you'll notice that your thumb and the base of the side of your hand will really thicken it a lot. So these are our base shapes. So we've started with the palm as a square that's slightly wider at the top and as long as the middle finger. We split across through the middle, and then we radiate it out from the base of the palm to space things like where the fingers come from and go to, and then we've mapped the pads out. Now the next thing to do is think of how the hand not just opens in a radial fashion, but when you close your fingers, they also close in a converging fashion. So just like how all the fingers radiate out from the base of the palm, from the wrist, when you close your fingers, they don't go down straight up and down, they close inwards. And also, your thumb, when you close that inwards, since it's also hinged at that center point in the wrist there, it'll pull in and the pad will be squashed. You can think of it like the cleavage of the hand, which is more interesting than it actually is, but it sounds really nice. And you can imagine the pressure pushing the pad by, for instance, the pinky on the right there is pushing it out, and how the thumb is coming up and compressing it in. The pad, of course, that goes under the fingers will be folded under the fingers, so you won't really see it. But you can see the angle at which the fingers converge because they come back in and point in towards that point in the wrist there. Now, let's apply this. We're going to do this as a basic hand, and we'll transform this one into various levels of furry or monster hands, just as good for werewolves as it is for anything else. So we started with a square, radiated the fingers out, and we've got those radial lines around the base of the wrist that we can use then to line the fingers up size-wise. I need to taper these fingers a bit, they're a bit sausagey. If the fingers are looking a bit sausagey, that's because you probably haven't tapered them enough. They need to be a bit thinner at the top than they are at the bottom. All your fingers will do this. Your entire body does this. The further you get from the core of the body, the more a section will taper and become narrow. True for arms, legs, hands, fingers, etc. Alright, now let's clone it out a few times, and we'll make our variations. So the first variation here is just going to be a normal hand, but we're just going to add fur to it, and we're also going to add some claws as well. So, once we've got these out, let's zoom in a bit and start on that. We've got little tufts there, and remember what we talked about with the tufts being where you don't make the corner or where it compresses. So, in the pinchy bit in the thumb there, and of course the bones around the wrist, we've got the tufts there. And then we're just drawing over the existing pads of a normal human hand to draw the paw pads on the fingertips and on the palm. Now that's the kind of furry that can, use a smartphone, normal hands, easy peasy. The next one here, we're going to start really disturbing the silhouette and the shape. We'll make some structural changes. One of the first things we'll do is essentially cartoonify it. So you'll reduce it to essentially one knuckle instead of two. And what we'll do then is we'll thicken the fingers quite a lot, and then we'll reduce it, and now we'll also thicken the pads. One of the big things that happens as you sort of animalize a hand is that the pads will become a lot thicker. And you can even have some tufts of hair coming up around the edges of those paw pads. And you really want to thicken those those masses near the thumb, the side of the hand, and just below the fingers. And reduce the knuckle numbers as well. And make sure you thicken the fingers. Now, the next stage is essentially going to be turning it to very nearly a teddy bear one. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to remove a lot of the variance in the length of the fingers. Because what you'll notice about animal paws is, where humans have very different length fingers, animals don't. They're all about the same length. And so, we'll space them out, and we'll put the pads in, and we'll also disturb the shape of the pads on the palm. Now once we've done that, we also add the fur and fluff around the edges, remembering that sort of organic rhythm, and it'll come up anywhere where it's compressed, or anywhere where it can't make the corner. So it'll be a lot around the wrists, where that transitions into the hand. You can even have a little tuft coming up the center line of the palm there, where the tendons will stick out. And also remember that the fingers will also start to rotate inwards, and sort of group together. And then of course the full extreme one of this is just a straight up paw. You'll do a very simple blob, map out the paw print pattern, and you've got little paws. If you're doing a really cartoony character, this will be a good way to do it. It's very straightforward. You essentially just do a sort of blob for the hand, and then map out the paw pads to it, and you're done. So we've got our base hand, that's the same shape, just the change of the outline. This one, with one less knuckle, and thicker fingers, and thicker pads. This one, where all the fingers are the same length, and rotated inwards, and the pads are much thicker, and then cat. Now, let's do a few demos of this. So, we'll do a couple of example figures of different kinds here, because these rules will work for your reptiles, your frogs, your birds, your deer, all the rest of them. They'll apply just the same. It's just up to you to decide how you want to stylize them. So we'll start with a little sort of kobold dragon girl here. Now if you want to learn how to draw bodies, again, I've got that video, it'll be linked in the description, on how to draw the female form. I've got one for men too. Not as many people watch it, but could do us some love. And so we've got the kobold there. We'll leave the hands for now. And now we'll draw a sort of frog girl, with a long sort of tongue, and sort of sideways sort of Kermit eyes. And we'll apply the same rules to these, so I'll do the figures minus the hands. You would, do the hands as part of detailing when you draw, but for the purposes of this, we'll leave them unhanded. And now here, we'll do a deer. Now, deer don't really have a kind of hand that's their own, or cows, anything with hoofs. So we're going to be taking some liberties with this one. You'll see when we get there, but if I do draw a character like this, I take the sort of Warner Brothers approach to it, and have the hoofs go from sort of hard, bone, nail-like appendages to being soft, rubbery, wiggly things, because that, gives them more human expression. But we'll come back to that one in a second. So let's begin then with the one on the left, our kobold. So same thing as we did for the hand. So we've got the palm, we split it up, we have the fingers radiating outwards, we're adding that big pad for the thumb there. We'll have the second knuckle, because we're only going to do 2 knuckles in this one. And we're spacing them out really wide, and I'm only going to do 3. I'm going to do a sort of a cartoony, Simpsons-y one. One of the things you'll see quite often is in your funny animals, you'll notice that they'll have reduced finger numbers quite often, because they're sort of very connected to Western cartooning, and that's sort of Western cartooning tradition, so I will tend to do them with less fingers, just because it's a very sort of cartoony Simpsons thing to do. And you can see here, I've got really big second sections of each of the fingers. They're really big. Instead of tapering, they actually get wider towards the end, and put the claws on there. Now these could be furry ones, but in this case, I'm going to have them be lizardly. And so that means I just won't do the tufts on the edges. I'm just going to follow them around, but I'm going to pay particular attention to making sure I really thicken those pads and make them bulge on the palm there, the one next to the thumb and just below the fingers, and the same thing on the other side. I'm going to do the fingers on there, and remembering I can get the direction for the fingers by remembering that they radiate in and out from the palm. But of course you can splay them out if you want as well. And then the creases on the fingers, and just darkening the nails there so they sort of show up more visibly. And that's that one. We've got a kobold with big koboldy lizardy paws. So moving on to the next one then, we've got the frog. Now this one is going to be very straightforward. Again, I'm going to do a reduced finger number, because I think frogs have reduced fingers. I should probably check that, but anyway. So we'll do the thumb coming down, and we're going to radiate the fingers from the palm, remembering that the fingers, the first bone of the finger, starts at the wrist, and they're all bound together by the palm. And then on the end of those fingers, I'm just going to put a big flat suction pad thing. And then, once I've got that in the sketch, when I smooth it over, you can see that helps me get that right shape for those big sticky froggy pads. It's just a big circle stuck on the end of the finger, and you integrate it in when you do your unified line art after the sketch. Now it's fairly straightforward. Now, next one, once I've got a bit more detail in there, is the deer. Now, since these are hoof hands, the hoofs don't really have articulation, but I'm going to do that anyway. And now, since it's the deer, they've got those kind of long sections that have a sort of long pointy bit. So I'm going to basically pretend that they've got, a few more of them, and that they're really bendy and rubbery, and maybe sort of leathery. And so I'll be extra careful to give really thick pads to the palm there, and I'll darken them to make them look like they're sort of hoofs, and add some fur tufts around the base there where they join the hand. And even if I have an angle where the fingers are overlapping quite a lot, so long as there's a consistent shape there, even the ones that are hidden and that shape isn't communicated, as long as you get the idea of what they're shaped like from the other hand, you can sort of assume on the hand in the front there, and maybe add a bit of shine. And so there we have the same rule applied, and the same method applied to different kinds of figures. Reptile, frog, deer, it'll work with anything. So, next thing is we'll demonstrate different sort of amounts of the strength of it on this character here, and with a bit of a surprise bit at the end as well, but we'll get to that in a sec. So, start with a figure, hands from the side, and we're going to think about how we want to communicate things like the paw pads and how they overlap. One of the really important things with hands and having them communicate well is having parts of them overlap each other. Overlap is a really important way to communicate depth in your illustration. Now, same as before, palm, and having that point at the base of the palm there, that everything radiates out from, and so we'll do the structure for the fingers, radiating out, and then the normal number of joints. These will just be straight up normal human hands, but with fur on them. And just the tip of that middle finger there, and add around the base of the thumb there. The thumb's probably a little bit thin. I might thicken that up in a minute. I've got to remember that the pad of the thumb starts on that center line cross on the palm, which means at a minimum, when viewing the hand, the thumb pad should come at least halfway across, more so if the hand's moving in or you're viewing it from a different angle. And now again, from the top, we'll have the palm, which is sort of like a whiskey flask shape. It's not really flat. And the top edge of it is also an arcing shape. It's not flat either. The top edge arc of the palm comes back to how everything radiates around that point of the wrist, and that top sort of shape of the palm does as well. So that's both the hands drawn. The bottom one's a little small, but we can scale that up a bit. There we go. Now these probably are a bit larger than hands I would draw on a non-furry character, but since they're sort of more animalistic, larger hands can help communicate that. And then just adding the tufts there where it integrates with the wrists and on top of the knuckles and some claws, and we're good. Now, let's do the same thing, and we're going to do it a bit sort of stronger. So we'll again start with the palm, and we'll do big, thick fingers. So they're two jointed, and the ends are thicker than the lengths. Now on the human ones, they tapered smaller, but on the more animalistic ones, they get larger. If you imagine like an animal's paws, they can be thicker on the end because we've got those big, thick paw pads, so the same thing's going to happen here. And I'm going to do the fingers all roughly the same length. So on the human hand, they narrowed and got smaller as we got towards the pinky, whereas this one, they're much larger, and that they're all about the same sort of largeness. And I'm simplifying the pads as well. And so, the hand here, I'll keep the reference in view as well, because I want to have them be roughly the same sort of position as the human ones. I'll pose the fingers. The other thing you'll notice here is that I'm trying not to have them be too regular in their spacing, so I'm sticking the two middle fingers together. The reason for that is it stops you from having, like we talked about with doing fur, you want to avoid mechanical rhythm anywhere you can. That even goes as far as spacing the fingers. So in this one, I want to have the fingers spaced unevenly, so it's a more organic sort of position, because if you move your hand around, they're very seldom all your fingers spaced exactly the same distance apart. Now, this one here, we're going to do those simplified little paw pads. So that's just the palm and some little blobs or like a bar that you can sort of put texture over for the paws. This is a very animal-y sort of one where we've just got the palm and no knuckle, just one blob on the end. And you can see that they all work, they just give the character a different impression for the kind of things they can do. Now, also remember, just like last time, the methods of construction you use here for, cat or dog paws will work for anything else. So let's turn this into a lizard. This is sort of based loosely on the Nergigante out of Monhan. And so I'm turning those big ears into the two big horns. Best bit of trivia is that Nergigante's theme song is mostly horns. Anyway. And so now, instead of tufts of fur, we're going to add those scales there with bigger scales on the knuckles and having them taper as they sort of move away. And then we'll remove some of the tuft. We'll put some scales in the arms as well, on all sort of upper surfaces that would, you get scuffed on things. Add some texture there for the horns, have some stuff stick out, maybe do a big sort of lizardly tail, and then again some tapering sort of scales there, and then change it all to be the same color, and you'll see that the same thing kind of applies. We've got all the different ones, and even the lizard one works because it's all the same stuff. So, a few demos then. Let's start with some basic shapes for the palms and the upper arms. And now, let's have those fingers radiating out from the base of the palm. We'll add the sections to it. So in this case, we're just going to do 2 sections, and we'll have the sections on the end be larger than the lengths, and we'll have the fingers all be the same length, which doesn't happen on a human hand. And now we've got those basic shapes in. Let's go in on a new layer and detail them. And you can see here, adding the pads and the furry tufts, you've got pretty much straight away 2 sort of beastly furry hands. Good for werewolves, good for furries, anyone who wants them, all good. Now, again, let's do another pair. So, we've got the palms, we've got the fingers that'll be based on the radiating shapes from the base of the wrist, or the base of the palm, sorry. I'll move them down so we've got a bit of space to work. And so, focusing on those pads that get thicker, so the pads of the palm get much, much thicker. And we've got the fingers there. Again, 2 sections, the sections on the end, much, much thicker. So things like the thumb and each of the fingers, they'll be shorter, they'll be the same length, and that second section will be much bigger and wider and fatter. And now, with the base shapes in, again, we'll go over and do a refined sketch. We'll add those tufts of fur where they can't make the corner. We'll add the claws in. We'll add the paw pads. We'll really thicken those pads on the inside of the palm. And add some flaring of fur there. And now, we'll do the other hand. Another thing you can see here when I'm doing the top of the palm is add some really sort of thick bones to the top of the back of the hand. That can really help it look even more sort of animalistic. Again, you wouldn't really do it on sort of a human female character, but on human furry character, yeah, it works well. You want to have that sort of animalism present. And so now, let's have another one, 2 palms out. And you can see that sort of whiskey bottle shape really pronounced there. Again, the how to draw basic hands is covered a lot in my just straight up how to draw hands video. And so now we'll have the fingers bent down, and remembering that they focus and they gather in towards the center. They don't just rotate down, they rotate down and gather in, just like when you move your fingers up and out, they spread out. When you put your fingers into the palm, they gather in and converge. And so we'll do some froggy hands here. So big thick pads on the end. We'll do some big sort of rounded things, those big sort of rounded shapes on the top there. Another finger on there, making that second section really wide and resting the thumb on the fingers there. Thickening those pads up. And we'll make them a little slimy by having the sort of little bloobs come off the edges of the shape there, so to make them look a bit sort of gooey. And now on the other side as well, paying particular attention to those pads of the palm. The hand isn't just shaped by the fingers. The thickness of the palm, those big pads, is really important, especially on non-human hands, since those really make them look like paws. So speaking of which, let's do some fairly big, scary claws and paws, doing a really cutesy sort of pose. So, we'll have them out there. This one, if you're having like the two hands interact, be prepared to sort of move the pieces out a bit and flip canvas a fair bit. And so this one, I want to do that sort of that love heart shape with the fingers. With less sort of points of articulation, it can be a bit tricky. So I've decided to go with fingers that have a couple of extra knuckles. Because, if you imagine, you can't really get your cat's paws to make that sort of shape. That wouldn't work. You need fingers for some things. So here's this one here. A little sort of heart thing inside there. I'll sort of flesh out the arms and shoulders, sort of give a bit of a contrast with a cutesy sort of pose. And again, you can see there's those flaring. Anytime there's a corner, I've got the opportunity to add some sort of flaring bits of fur there, where it doesn't have to make the corner. And then paw pads as well. And then more on the wrist, and sort of where it doesn't make the corner on things like the shoulder and the upper arm. If they're quite muscular, they'll have more sort of bulges and curves. And here I'm changing it to be like a full 5-finger hand, just because it sort of fits the pose a bit better. And the little love heart thing in the middle. Let's fix up the broader pose. So, now let's put this all together in a speed paint. Now this will be a very quick overview of the speed paint. If you are interested in following along with one of these that isn't sped up, I have a series of 1-to-1 speed draw-alongs where I talk through the whole process, not sped up at all, and you can follow along as we go. So I'll link them as well in the description, and hopefully be able to put a link up here to the playlist of the 3 that I currently have. And I'm trying to add one every other week or so. So there might well be more by the time you're reading this. But anyway, back to the speed paint. So I want a sort of action pose. This is the one that was asked for by the server event winner. So I've got a Little Red Riding Hood versus the Big Bad Wolf in like a fight thing, like in Darkstalkers. I think it was like Buretta, and I forget what the name of the werewolf bloke was. And so a big sort of slashing move, and she's sort of dodging back. And so one of the challenges of this one was getting them both in frame, because the Big Bad Wolf is big and Little Red Riding Hood is little. So I had to have him bending down so they can both be sort of in the same eye line, in the same frame. And so I'm just moving them up there so they're sort of overlapping each other a bit. So I've got like, them stepping into each other's space, like a real sort of close quarters fight thing. Now we've got the base sort of shapes done. I'm going to start sort of refining the shape. So you can see here, I'm doing the hand, that same radial pattern out from the wrist, and then the claws on there, tufts for the wrist there, and then doing the chest and the neck, and putting out those abs in, and then the muscles down the side, like I think they're called lats. And now, detailing the face. So I've got the base forms in. If you want to know how to do furry heads, I've got a video on that as well, so I'll link that here. But here I'm just going through the detail and pulling that sort of lip up, moving the ears forward, they're a little bit sort of far back. Adding those tufts everywhere, especially the long sort of mane of hair, since this is like a big bad wolf, it's like a werewolf kind of thing. Still wearing pants though, because the video's got to go on YouTube, so no matter how much of a animalistic monster you are, you still put your pants on. And so the other hand at the back there, just closing the palm around that. That one I wasn't loving, so I put a little asterisk on that one to come back to it. And so now I'm just detailing out the pants, and where the pants are sort of folding and sort of gathering in there around the crotch, and then pushing that foot out and back and making it flat. Again, the legs video is coming soon. I've got this video, and then I've actually got a review coming out, which is kind of cool. XP Pen sent me an XP pen, so I'm going to do a review of that. Spoiler, it's great. But yeah, I'll have a video on that one. And then I think it'll be another one of the 1-to-1 speed draw-alongs, and after that I should have part 2 of this one. So it's all actually pretty much recorded. I just sort of realized that I had way too many hours of footage. So it's definitely coming soon. It'll be the next proper big tutorial video, but between this and next one, it'll be this, the XP Pen review, the 1-to-1 speed draw-along, because I need to do another one of them, and then it'll be the furry or monsters sort of legs and feet and claws and so forth. That one's going to be great. Looking really good. But here I'm just doing the detail of the hand then on Little Red Riding Hood. I've drawn the hand a bit big. That's fine. I realized it was too big as I was drawing it, but I decided I'll just get the shape right and I'll shrink it. And I'm just doing the detailing on the pair of axes there, because I feel like if she was a fighter, she'd use like a pair of like mini woodsman axes, like dual wielding, because that'd be cool. And then just getting the rest of the shape there on the sort of the lower body for us, so like the chest and midsection and legs. I'm not going to worry too much about the pelvis here because I'm going to have a skirt go over it, so as long as I've got the rough volumes fine, that's all I really sort of care about. And I'm going to have it sort of fluttering up because it's an action pose, so I can sort of, communicate that however I like. And now I'm starting on some of the clothing damage there. Nothing, again, this is for YouTube, so don't get yourself. But I'm just going to have a bit of it sort of coming off there with sort of very near miss of the sort of the wolf stepping in. And now I'm just adding in sort of a rough background of what I want to have there. You can notice I'm doing them in different colors. One of the big reasons I'll do a multi-character thing like this in different colors is you can see there where the two characters are getting close. If this was all done in one color, it'd get kind of tricky to like tell one thing from another. So that's a really good way to sort of deal with that. It's one of the strengths of digital, being able to use different colored pencils for your sketches at sort of the push of button. And so here I'm just adjusting sort of the positions there, and now starting on the inking. So I start with a naive inking. So this is just the same brush I was using for sketching, just with smoothing turned on. Now I'll go over all of the shapes here. The brush I use, just in case anyone wants to ask in the comments, is the soft air brush with the softness turned off. That's it. You've already got it. Most actual software comes with like a hard round brush. It's just what it is. I've got a YouTube short on how to find it in your software too, so if you're interested, you can do that. And so just banging out the line art there on Little Red Riding Hood. And you can see all the line art here is the same thickness. I'm going to have a separate section where I go over and thicken the line art. And so now I'm just going to work on the background, now that I've got the volumes for the figures worked out. It's going to be a very basic one, so just, dirt, grass, trees, and the skyline. And then I'm going to copy the skyline in between each layer of the background, and that'll make it bluer and paler further away it goes. And then just a color overlay to make it more sort of green, and map out where I think the shadow is going to need to be. Maybe a bit of a glow coming through the trees. Alright, with that done, I can start dropping in the flats. So I'm going to do the red for Little Red Riding Hood's cape. Also, making sure I don't go too saturated. It's important. You'll see quite often when artists get started, they'll have like max saturation for everything, and that'll give you that real MS Paint vibe. So never go above like 50% saturation, except on maybe like one accent color if you really want to. So just putting that together with the background there. Alright, I've got my basic flats in. Now I'm going to go over and do those little bits of extra thickness on the liner. You can see those little red dots appearing everywhere? That's that. I essentially place it like ambient occlusion. Now next is I'm adding the secondary color for the wolf's fur. So that's just things like on the face and chest. Now I've dropped a whole layer of darkening color and set it to multiply. Now I'm cutting it out to do the lighting. So you'll quite often see me adding shading, but if the thing is mostly shaded, it's quicker to instead delete some shading out than add all of it in. So if your thing's going to be mostly shaded and only have a few spots that are lit, you'll be better off just dropping a whole lot of tone on top of it and then carving some out. Okay, and now I've added the secondary layer of shading there. That's done with the lasso tool. And then a couple of bits of underlight. So I've got them over some fairly sort of pale dirt, so I thought it might be a good idea to have a bit of bounce light coming from below. The bounce light can really be a good way of sort of connecting your image with the scene it's in. And a bit of a warm glow there. And now mapping out where I want the sort of slash marks to be. Doing them in a separate layer. And then I've got my post-processing effects. I've got a video on that one if you're interested. It does all seem to sort of snap together at the end. But here it is, finished. I've got the action scene. I've cropped it in a little bit to make it a bit more intense. Cropping is a great way to do that. And I've got the two characters interacting. It's got a time of day. It's got action, what more do you want? Now, you want to have a go yourself. There's a homework sheet that's going to be linked in the description. Have a go of that, and then post that in the Discord. I like to get in there every couple of weeks at this point, and try and catch up. We'll see how I do. Now, if you like what you see, and you'd like to see more of it, or help support the channel, do the like, subscribe, consider joining our Patreon. I do also have classes that I run. We're looking at having a new intake probably around the start of February. So it'll be a fairly limited number, so I'll make sure everyone gets a notification in Discord when that becomes available, so everyone's got a fair shot at it. Otherwise, I'll see you in the next video, which will be, well, XP pen review, then a slime speed paint, but after that, it's going to be the feet, the legs, the claws, the birdie feet, the lizard feet, all the feet, and the paw pads. So I'll see you in that one. In the meantime, thank you very much for following along. I'll see you in the next one. Alright, cheers, you've got. Bye.